Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Some backstory. My now passed on next door neighbor was a terribly busybody who felt it was her God-given right to tell everyone in our street what they could and couldn't do, from where they parked their cars to what flowers they could grow, and so much more. She had to know everyone's business and would harass people until she got answers, even going as far as stalking. But that is for other stories. If she didn't get her own way, she would spread the most evil gossip. Her adult children, a son and a daughter, were both greedy and deeply entitled, believing that because the majority of the streets were either social housing or rented properties, they were better than everyone else, and if they didn't get what they wanted, then mother would sort it out. I have many stories about this neighbor far worse than this, but I will start off with this one, as it's the mildest thing she had done and fits into the entitled parent subreddit better. The son owns 2 other properties near the end of the street which he rents out. At the very end of the same street is another house with a plot of land right next to it. The owners of that house and land built a garage that they use for work, rebuilding old cars and bikes. The business is at least 30 years old, handed down from father to son. It's very small, so they can only work on one vehicle at a time. But due to the owner's skills at restoration, they are always in high demand. One day, about 10 years ago, the son rocks up in his latest BMW and walks up to the owner, a father and his teenage son. The rest of the conversation is paraphrased, as I was not a witness, but this was told to my family by the owners themselves. The entitled son says, "Hey guys, it's your lucky day. I want to buy your land. I will give you 15,000 pounds. Notice that he didn't ask if it was even for sale or offered to negotiate a fair price. The owner tells him, no, sorry. The business is not for sale. Thanks for the interest though. I wasn't asking for your business. You can set up somewhere else. I want this land. It's just the right size to build another house on. Well, sorry, no. This is our livelihood. We can just move. We would lose business while looking for someplace else, and besides, it used to be my father's garage and it's next door to our home, so why would we want to sell it? So you can make money. Insert a random duh face here. But we make money working here, so sorry, but it's not for sale. The son then does what you would expect a grown man of 30, yes, 30 to do. He complains to his mother. His mother takes no time at all to walk back to the garage. Why won't you sell your garage to my son? He wants to build a house here. Well, because this is our place of business and we don't want to sell it. You shouldn't even be working here. It's dangerous. I can assure you, ma'am, everything is up to code and we have every right to work here. Now please, leave us alone. What are you hiding in there? Is it drugs? What? No, we are fixing up an old bike. I knew it. You are working here illegally. Sell your land to my son or I will contact the authorities. The owner laughed and told her to go ahead. She stormed off and they thought it was over. Just the crazy ravings of a mad granny, right? An hour later, sure enough, the police arrived. Apparently, an anonymous caller rang them to say that the owners had been dealing drugs out of the garage. It was obvious who had called him. Of course, all the neighbors had seen the police arrive. Our street is normally quiet, and we are all nosy jerks, so when you see a blue flashing light, you step out and watch the show unfold. The entitled mother took great glee in telling everyone standing around and watching the chaos how the owners had been selling drugs to children, and how she wasn't the one who called him, but everyone knows what is going on. And thank goodness something is finally being done about it. Half the neighbors were shocked at this event, but a few of the longer-term residents were already giving her the side eye like it was on special offer at Tesco or Walmart. She must have been feeling pretty smug with herself. Only there was a snag, just a little one. Because a tiny garage worked on rare and old cars, which can be expensive, the owners had CCTV. That was something the entitled mother had not counted on. After the police had shown up, the owners knew who the culprit was and had no issue with showing footage, complete with sound, to the officers, showing the entitled mother threatening to call the police if they didn't sell the land. With half the neighbors out and watching events unfold, the entitled mother's face switched from smugness to fear. As the police walked away from the garage and approached her instead, the officer then asked if they could step inside her home to discuss something she probably didn't want her neighbors to hear. She received a warning regarding harassment and wasting police time. The owners of the garage were never bothered again, and the last remaining neighbors, who didn't know how bad she was, finally saw her for the witch she was. I woke up this morning to some intense screaming coming from the neighbors across the street. There has been some drama going on between the two houses across from us because, for whatever reason, Karen, one of the two neighbors, decided to have an issue with a newly installed ramp on her next-door neighbor's property. And that's another tragedy in its own because the lady living in the other house got into a car accident a couple of weeks ago that left her with a spinal injury and got put into a wheelchair because of it. There has always been drama between those two guys, but mostly Karen was the instigator, and over some nonsense there is no denying that. So, as I was saying, we woke up in the morning on Karen screaming like no tomorrow, saying that this ramp was illegal and some other nonsense like that, which had nothing to do with her. It's not even near her property by any means. The screaming match gets really intense, and then Karen decides that waking up the entire neighborhood with her screeching wasn't really enough, and she takes this craziness of her to the next level. She runs into her neighbor's yard, walks up, then shoves her wheelchair-bound neighbor down the ramp with all she got, causing her to roll down fast, crash into the ground, and fall off her wheelchair. The poor lady's 12-year-old son and 17-year-old daughter rushed out from inside the house after hearing the sound of the crash and the screaming. It seems that they were still asleep when this whole situation started. The boy rushes to his mom and tries to tend to her, while the daughter takes one look at her mother on the ground, then bolts towards Karen and flies at her with one hell of a swing at her head that ends up breaking her jaw. Picked up the phone and called the cops the moment we saw Karen breaking into her neighbor's property, and within 10 minutes they were on scene, calling an ambulance for the wheelchair lady and for Karen as well, since she was laying on the ground in a poor shape after the daughter was done scratching and punching her. I thought our surveillance cameras caught the whole thing, and so I offered to show the cops what exactly happened and even give them a copy if they needed it. This whole thing is still fresh, so there are no end-game resolutions yet, but I can assure you from what the cops were saying that Karen is going to face some serious charges once everything is settled. They weren't sure amongst themselves if the daughter used excessive force defending her mother or not, but that's probably to be decided later after conducting further investigations. Not gonna lie, I of course don't wish for any disabled person to experience what this poor lady went through, but I'm glad as a result that we, as a neighborhood, are getting rid of that nasty woman terrorizing everyone around. Good freaking riddance. Update. Hello there everyone, it's a bit late, but I thought you'd be interested in knowing what went down eventually in Karen's case. When her trial started, her lawyers tried to say that there were problems between the neighbors, but that didn't really change what she did. The evidence and the words of the neighbors' kids proved that Karen attacked without any good reason. The jury decided that Karen was guilty of all the very serious charges she was charged with. The judge thought about how bad what she did was and how it hurt someone who was already struggling because of their health. So the judge said Karen had to go to prison for 5 years. This made a lot of people in the neighborhood happy because they were afraid of Karen and what she might do when she gets out. I don't know why I felt that I needed her to be gone for longer than that, but I hope when she gets out, she get the hell out of that neighborhood and never ever come back. Hey Reddit, I need a tiebreaker vote here. Our family and friends are divided here. My wife and I went shopping and I went to a different aisle to get some jerky. I heard my wife scream help, so I ran over and she was freaking out because an elderly woman hugged our son. You can tell the woman was harmless. The woman's son came along and profusely stating that she had dementia and she meant no harm, but she tends to view every child as her child. I said it was okay and I myself apologized for my wife's overreaction. During this time I was not paying attention and my wife called 911. And also she called over security. It became a huge mess for all parties because my wife was not letting this issue go. You could also tell the son was extremely embarrassed, as was I. I was trying to relax my wife, but she was going on a complete meltdown rage, saying that this mother should be in a home if she cannot keep her hands to herself. But if she got our kid sick, tried to kidnap him, got combative and hurt him. All of which I agree, impossible outcomes, but I told her none of that happened, so let's just leave it. Security states, since the wife called the police, we had to wait for them to show up so they can file a report as per their store policy. About 25 minutes later, police showed up and asked what happened, and my wife explained everything. You can tell the police were like, what the hell's wrong with this woman? I felt nothing but disappointment. Police took the statement and started laughing as they left, gave the son of the elderly mom a fist bump, and said sorry. My wife was upset I did not have her side. She was upset how I took the side of the son instead of her. I explained his mom was clearly sick. It was a harmless gesture and explained she was the one that acted unreasonably. I did acknowledge her concerns, but nothing bad happened. We could have just let it slide and went on with our day. She told me that I failed as a husband. So we ran the story by our family and friends, and it's like 50-50 split. So my brother-in-law said this will be a funny story for Am I the Jerk subreddit. He frequents the sub. So Reddit, was I the jerk here? Sorry, forgot to add our kid is 19 months old. And now some comments on the post. Someone saying, you're not the jerk. Good lord. Your wife's initial concern was justified, but after the situation was explained and an apology was offered, she should have dropped it. There was no reason to call 911 or even store security. You didn't fail as a husband. You were acting rationally. Another one adds, not the jerk. It was fine for your wife to yell for help and get upset when it first happened. Calling 911 and continuing to make a huge deal out of it after the son explained the dementia was out of line. And definitely a huge overreaction. I mean, does your wife have PPA because she's reacting as if one of the possible outcomes was actually happening? The could-haves are overshadowing the reality. Yes, it's scary when a stranger approaches and touches your kid. But with normal intervention, it was fine. Didn't need to follow up. My 18-month-old fell on the ground once and a Portuguese grandma picked her up and held her for the extra 20 seconds it took for me to get to her. Part of me was like, don't touch other people's kids. But she was helping, kind, caring, and handed me my child instantly with an admonition about shoes and coats. It was October, but like 18 Celsius, so anyway, I did not call the police. And finally, one last commenter is going with, not that jerk. While your wife does have a point, I don't know how old your kid is, but that's a little traumatic to have some strange woman come grab you. It's scary for a little kid. The son should be a little more careful with his mom. What if she grabbed a kid with special needs and the kid hurt her or themselves? I do think, though, he apologized, explained the situation, and nothing else bad happened, calling 911 was too far. I think if your wife felt strongly about reporting it, tell the store manager, that's it. In nursing school, you have clinical days. The day before clinical, you have to go to the hospital and pick a patient you'll work with the next day. You also have a chance to work as a CNA while in school to gain more experience and make a little money, because it's difficult to work full-time and go through nursing school. There were 2 hospitals in my small town. I work at Hospital A in the ICU as a CNA, and my clinicals were in a larger hospital, Hospital B. I worked a shift at my hospital and ran over to the other one across town to pick my patient and get my preclinical work done. It was about 30 minutes after 7 when I got there. Most hospital shifts you work are 12 hours, 7 to 7. I knew I was going to be on a mid-surge floor, so I got on the elevator to ride up and look through my paperwork to find out what unit I'll be at the next day. A lady in a pantsuit with a hospital badge was already on the elevator and gave me a look like a bead in her Cheerios. Okay, I just moved to the side and finally found my paper, letting me know what floor and unit I needed to go to. In a really ugly tone, the pantsuit asked me, "Where are you headed?" Staying polite, "I am heading to 3N. She slammed the button, and I just said, "Thank you." As we were riding, she turned to me and started chewing me out. "It's not appropriate for you to be coming in 20 minutes after shift change. We've been understaffed all day and those units are slammed right now." I just kinda stared at her for a second and thought, I am not going to be disturbing the nurses, and if I have to wait on a chart, that's fine. I don't intend on interrupting the report, but I just said, okay. If anything, her face got angrier. My floor arrived and she stepped out with me and kept pace with me as I headed to the nurse's station. I went to the side and took a look at the assignment board to see if anyone had a diagnosis I hadn't worked with before, then sat down out of the way and waited quietly because the charge nurses were still discussing assignments. When they finished, I'd ask the charge nurse if there was a patient I should pick. I'd do this because sometimes there were interesting procedures, or I'd get a chance to practice my skills the next day. As I was waiting, pantsuit lady watched me, and when she saw me sit down, she immediately snapped her fingers at me and pointed down to the floor and said, "You, come here." The voice was nasty enough that it stopped several people mid-report to find out what was going on. I stood up and approached her, and she grabbed my sleeve and pulled me over closer to the charge nurses. Ignoring me and talking directly to the charge nurses, she proceeded to tell them that I was their aide and she wanted them to make sure I was written up for being late. I realized then that she thought I worked there. I was a lot less confrontational or aggressive then, but I never really got the chance to say anything as she jerked her hand away from me and wiped it like she just touched poo. Looked at me with a face I can only describe as sour lemon smugness, and walked away. The charge looked at me and said, "We already have an aide, but sure, could use you. Let me see how." She trailed off as I held out my hand and said, "I don't work here. I'm with School X and I'm here to pick out a patient for clinicals tomorrow." Does that woman always treat people like they are dogs? The charge nurse stared at me for a second and then started laughing and said, "Stupid witch. Don't mind her. We all hate her." She then asked, "How much longer do you have?" I replied that I will graduate in 6 months, and I also asked if they had any interesting procedures or if they had a patient that a 101 student nurse would make easier to handle. She also asked where I planned on working after I graduated, and I just looked down the hallway where the pantsuit had gone and just said, "Well, not here," which made her laugh even more. I had a truly relaxing clinical the next day with a sweet elderly lady with dementia and a minor medical condition. We folded laundry together to keep her busy and to keep her from pulling at her surgical sites. What was really fun about it is that the next semester when representatives come to try to recruit you to the hospital, I got to reply to a question about why I wasn't interested in their hospital. I got to say that I didn't appreciate the way they treated their staff, and I told them my story. There was recognition in their eyes when I described the lady, and they shook their heads when I told them about the event. Plus, I knew that my hospital was waiting for me to graduate so I could come to work in the ICU, which was my dream at the time, and it was for a bit more pay than the other hospital was offering anyway.